Hey, you remember that time that Disney released a copycat of Madagascar the year after Madagascar came out? I certainly didn't. I'd vaguely heard of this movie, but it was literally only last week when I actually realized it wasn't a thrown-together straight-to-DVD ripoff to capitalize on DreamWorks' success, but an actual bona fide theatrically released movie from the actual Walt Disney Studios? Not to mention the fact, it's directed by the guy who animated the dinosaurs for Jurassic Park. This is indeed, and I have no idea how I didn't actually know about this before, Disney's The Wild. Released in 2006, so yes, 1 year later, this movie also follows a group of animals from the Central Park Zoo, including a lion protagonist, a health-conscious giraffe with an interspecies will they won't they side plot, as well as some zany penguins on the side. It's about them breaking out of the zoo to carry out a rescue mission, going on about the wild before finding themselves on a boat across the ocean that leads them to a remote island with an isolated tribe of animals with a catchy, annoying song. Yeah, it's totally a different movie. Totally not been a script leak going on somewhere along the lines. So the movie begins with, fun fact, the very last Disney animation theatrical release to use this old logo. I watched the beginning of Meet the Robinsons just after this, both to check the logo and to wash out my brain after this god-awful movie, and yeah, the new logo's right there. What a horrendous send-off. But even still, it has a nice little joke attached to it, as we get a little bit of cheeky voiceover from Samson the lion. And as it gets interrupted, we have the little spot on the Disney logo stopping and restarting again. It's a pretty fun touch. It's a nice little joke, okay? I'll allow it. And it's the kind of thing you can only really do with this old Disney logo, so maybe it wasn't such a waste after all. Anyway, the narration then takes us into some pretty nice abstract recreation of presumably the African savannah, but to get the name check in early, it's of course only described as
The Wild.
And in case you did miss what this movie's called, don't worry, they're going to be bringing it up quite a lot. And then for the rest of this opening, I actually really love it. We essentially get what I probably would have rathered the whole movie to look like. Admittedly, it does get a little bit weird when completely ripped kaiju wildebeest occurs, but it's still a pretty damn cool sequence and a real powerhouse of animation going on in there. And then, right soon afterwards, we get... Yeah, get used to that same cat soundbite as well, because they went cheap when it comes to the sound design. In fact, just get used to multiple returns to the well of character makes embarrassing noise followed by all the other characters laughing at them. I'm pretty sure it happens like 4 different times in the movie. It doesn't get good at any point, because if you hadn't seen that trope happen in a movie before, do not worry, they have very much covered it here and buried it deep into the ground. We also then get to see that Samson here has his son Ryan. Alongside being a Madagascar reference now, it's also a Lion King Mufasa Simba reference, I guess. Which is a very interesting particular choice because even though it's very clearly a different story, you may not from the marketing perspective want your early CG efforts to be compared to one of your all-time greatest 2D movies ever. You know, maybe steer away from having a lion father and son as the protagonists. Or heck, maybe they just wanted to relive the good times. This is not the good times. The imaginary laughing wildebeest then transpire to actually be zoo visitors laughing at him. And initially, it looks like Samson's almighty roar is to stop them laughing at his son. However, as soon as they start cheering, he goes into full paparazzi look-at-me mode whilst his son's just still right there. Wow, he's combining both the same character as Alex from Madagascar and a terrible dad. Disney hates fathers in this time period, huh? Good to know they've continued off straight from where Chicken Little left it. What a legacy for this new era of Disney to kick off with. This sequence also gives us an early hint of what's to come, which is you never actually see a single human face in this movie. Yes, the tiny production houses behind this clearly hadn't quite cracked animating humans yet, so the most you'll ever see is either humans from the back or the shoulders down. You can either be Toy Story, where you do try and animate humans in 1995, where you're clearly not ready to, or you could be core animation studios and just go, yeah, that's beyond us, we're just gonna skip that. And even then, the little of the humans you do see are somewhere between The Sims 2 and the little train driver figures in Thomas the Tank Engine. Clearly, all the movie was spent on the fur of this modestly animated lion, and not the immediate cutaway to this red jumper guy doing the Nelson pointing. By the way, with his arm fully stretched over the fence of the lion enclosure, yeah, I'm sure that couldn't go wrong in reality. Also, why is there only a child-high fence in front of the man-eating lions? I think it was the same thing in Madagascar, but even still. Anyway, we then have some father and son dialogue that really elects to spell out the insecurities of stock sound effect shrieking Ryan here.
Your roar stops a herd of wildebeest. Mine makes the babies laugh.
And to be fair, Samson does show some signs of being a supportive dad, clearly more than my boy Buck Clark. Anyway, following more back and forth of Ryan wanting to more properly roar whilst really laying on thick how they're really connecting the movie's themes to the title.
If you really wanted me to roar like you'd take me to
the wild.
But from there, we go to meet Benny the Squirrel, after already title dropping twice in the first opening 5 minutes. Anyway, here's Benny.
Rats do not got bling like this.
And believe me, this necklace stealing sequence won't be the last time we see him bothering female characters. It is notably dated. You could just tell the moment his Jim Belushi-voiced self lands in Samson's nostrils, he's gonna be the annoying sidekick the entire time through this movie. Arguably, there's a few contenders for that role, but we'll get there. And after Samson chomps on a steak that they for some reason refer to as a rabbit, even though it's very clearly a steak there, we then go to the animals take over the zoo once the humans are gone sequence. Weirdly announced by the squirrel counting down to when
the zoo will officially be ours.
When he's the one animal not limited to the confines of the zoo, but alright. We're then introduced to all the other characters we'll be following, including the one vague memory I have from the trailer of the koala getting his butternut squashed by a bar. Great. All of these characters, by the way, some of them are relevant, half of them are not. Half of them will only be here in this opening zoo sequence and then we'll practically never see them again. We then immediately see that koala getting beaten up by some flamingos with all the sound effects of a preschool TV show.
Really nice day.
And also, when they were casting this koala, I like to think that the production team had no idea that Eddie Izzard wasn't Australian. Either that or Eddie Izzard was actually doing an accent and I just didn't notice because it was that weak, but yeesh, sorry Eddie. They just heard a slightly rougher English accent and thought, yeah, that sounds about right. We also get our first tease of the squirrel's obsession with Bridget the giraffe saying,
Oh, I almost forgot to tell you. I'm going to ask Bridget out, finally.
And though Samson points out that they're different species, we all know Melman and Gloria have proven that anything's possible. We even get the classic bump into your love interest followed by romantic music motif. Sometimes I think I hate 2006. Well done, movie. You're getting all the ticks on the movie tropes bingo card. True to form, we also get a...
Don't stare at my spots, Benny. My eyes are up here.
Oh, of course.
Followed by the damn squirrel completely evading Bridget, clearly setting her boundaries, which persistently reoccurs as his favorite thing to do. That's a fun recurring gag in a Disney movie. Oh, but don't worry, this is a movie of completely sound writing, so she won't just give in to him at the end of the movie. Will she? We cut to a hippo and a kangaroo doing a dude we're so in sync bit to quickly set up their brief existence in this movie. Anyway, from there, you'll never guess where this movie goes. We are then blessed with a bizarre tournament of what I guess is ice curling in the penguins' enclosure. I guess it makes more sense than the surfing penguins in Surf's Up. But hey, at least that was a good movie. Like the human version of curling, they have a full ice rink with correct markings all there somehow, as well as the sweeps. But the cartoon logic just ended there, so they had to settle for tortoises as the projectiles. And in said tournament, we get the full assembly of our core cast, the lion, the koala, the snake, the giraffe, and the urban squirrel. Man, just writes itself, doesn't it? As does the squirrel calling Bridget his girlfriend, her saying he's not, followed by him then getting squished by her butt, swiftly revealed to be clearly into it, so much so that he then kisses her without any consent whatsoever. Walt Disney Pictures The Wild, everybody. So we then get to enjoy watching them play this game for what feels like 10 minutes, which is totally made worth it with the introduction of the secret play.
Hey everybody, guess what? We're gonna use the secret play!
The secret play being use the snake as a catapult, obviously. All the while, everyone around Samson keeps bringing up his son as an embarrassment because, you know, apparently this zoo's like the whole town of Chicken Little. Again. But not to worry, they win the game with the little tortoise they use to curl, farting itself to victory. Great. My favorite kind of humor. Meanwhile, with Ryan, the Chicken Little stand-in himself does a beat-for-beat recreation of the Nemo abduction scene, right down to the three quirky friends ushering Ryan away to touch the butt. In this case, the butt is roaring at a herd of gazelles because why not completely lift a moment from The Lion King? Also, in the logic of these animals, do these gazelles not think and talk and interact? Why aren't they at the curling tournament? And why would it be that only these gazelles are scared by the cubs roaring, unless everyone's not expecting the roar to not be good, even though it's clearly established and everyone's already making jokes about it from the entire zoo population bagging on this child? What is going on here? It's just famous scenes being ripped off by themselves at this point. And what do you know? He roars again. It's just as lame as before. In fact, it's the identical sound effect of a cat. So the dad comes back and berates him for it. Parenting. Easy. To be fair, at least in one step ahead of Chicken Little this time, he did actually feel bad about it once he said it.
I'm thinking how great it would be if Samson
The Wild.
wasn't my father.
Huh?
So now, as we reach the 4th title drop in this movie, already we get the family fallout sequence to get the next tick on the movie trope bingo card. We also get a tease that there is a great truth that Samson hasn't told Ryan. We'll note that down for later. And of course, it couldn't be a mid-tier animated movie from the 2000s without following up the falling out scene with an emotional montage to the tune of an emo pop rock band that presumably needed some extra cash. In this instance, that band in question is Lifehouse. Anyway, the song would get the of its time scapegoat, but unfortunately, Over the Heads dropped a banger of a soundtrack in the same year from Mr. Ben Folds, so. Anyway, the song happens. It's, forgettable. During which Ryan gets in a green container of some sort. However, shock and horror, the container's being driven away. He's then like, I changed my mind, I don't want to go. At which point, we then learn that the container would take him to the wild. The storyline might be so far exactly identical to Finding Nemo, but somehow it's triple the length in runtime. It's almost like Finding Nemo is much more concise in its storytelling. Following this attempt at emotion, we then get the words we've all been waiting for, by which I mean...
Get me? The pigeons.
Because yes, following this, somehow, we've arrived at the questionably realized pigeons. We've got some generic Indian music blasting out as Himir the pigeon here speaks in what is supposed to be a heavy Indian accent. And I've done the research. The voice of the main pigeon Himir here goes by the name of David Cowgill, a very, very white man.
Oh, Hamir! You are the great loser of all time!
And that's not even the weirdest bit. So, for the plot, the pigeons are here to help the zoo animals get directions round New York, right? A role that, in Madagascar, was fulfilled by a police horse that Marty asks for directions. Our boy David Cowgill also voiced that police horse.
If you hit the Chrysler building, you've gone too far.
This guy just knows his way around New York, I guess, no matter what reality he's in. I just kinda wish he'd stuck to his own ethnicity. Anyway, between the problematic dialogue and constant screaming, they get the information they need from the pigeons. And those pigeons never come back again, just randomly in there. Like most of the animals we've already seen up to this point. Then a few more minutes pass of even more setup and planning, as we have that classic boring characters work out what they're doing dialogue before Samson does the obvious I'm doing this alone thing and jumps in a rubbish truck, whereby the others obviously ignore him, yet somehow he gets into this rubbish truck without noticing the snake, koala, and giant giraffe that's also in there alongside him. The giraffe knocks the squirrel off of the truck, presumably so she can get 10 minutes without him advancing on her. And then the koala pops up in a popcorn bucket.
I've got popcorn up my bum. Do I look trashy in this?
Oh god, it really is one of these movies. And then more stupid stuff like that happens. The giraffe tries to tell everyone to duck as a tunnel's coming, whilst being slow to duck herself, despite being the only one animal that actually definitely needs to duck in this situation. We're then treated to the characters admiring the nighttime sights of New York City with the backing of a Coldplay song. Classic 2006. AI could never. And once they eventually get off this rubbish truck, they're chased by 3 dogs because, the lion and the snake would be running away in this situation. And they come to the conclusion...
Now jump!
Down there?
By improvising, that means pinching the only female character here on her backside. Yikes. Those dogs as well, we'll never see again. I don't even know if they're just full of cameo appearances, or if the writers just don't know what they're doing with all their characters. They just chucked in every animal they could. Maybe they just got a batch of models and wanted to use them all, I don't know. Now, if anyone saw the movie's poster at the time, it would not be beyond reasonable to presume that based on said poster, featuring alligators coming out from the sewers below the main characters, that they were going to feature as key antagonists in this movie, right? Well, here they are. They're in it for about 2 minutes as well. Even better, they're not even villains like the poster implied. It's just a complete bait and switch where they're just initially misunderstood. I guess they're trying to contrast that it was the evil dogs, but surely the evil poodle would have been funnier if you'd met the friendly alligators first. I don't know, I would have found that more funny. In a better movie anyway. Also, speaking about this poster, sure is funny how the background is all New York, and yet the plot is actually not really going to be set in New York for much longer. Anyway, the alligators put on their best New York stereotypes for a couple minutes, give them more directions, and sod off, because the pigeons weren't enough to do that role.
That's one of them talking koala bears.
Oh, I'm so cuddly. I like you.
We then transition to the morning, evading any obligation to explain how these animals got round New York City without being spotted and caught. And I mean, as we've established, this movie makes no attempt at human characters. Alas, they can't have those moments in Madagascar of humans reacting to these animals casually walking around. You know, a very classic jumping off point for some comedy, maybe. But I haven't heard much comedy yet, other than popcorn in the butthole. And yet, for a movie also going for animals breaking out the zoo to go to the big city, it completely glazes over their journey through the big city, as immediately they've made it to the harbor. I mean, I get it if that was extra padding you didn't need for the plot, but if that's the case, don't put the silhouette of the city in the logo of the movie if it's barely in there. Or how about cut out all the other scenes that are clearly more padding than the one that would actually be interesting to see? Madagascar, by its namesake, largely takes place in a completely different location, and yet, for the opening third of the movie, you get a better sense of New York City than in this movie, which made New York actively part of its marketing. But yes, they're at the harbor, Walmart, Simba, all packed and ready to go. And of course, they miss the boat just by the second, which leads to the incredibly layered piece of writing.
I failed. Again.
But then they have a brilliant idea. Remember the bit in that other movie from last year where the penguins hijacked the boat? Why can't we just do that? So they do that. And in doing so, we get to see just how determined the animators are to avoiding having to deal with a human face, as this guy screams at the lion, flaps his arms in the air, awkwardly walks sideways because he's not allowed to run away from them and show us his face. He then walks into the hose pipe, which miraculously flips him into the air and into the water. He does a full flip in the air, and yet we still don't see... Oh my god. Anyway, faceless Frankie falls off the boat and they're good to go. Well, Samson tries to explain to the snake how to steer the boat before demonstrating he was clearly capable of doing it himself. Because, you know, that's one of the known natural instincts a lion has. The koala pisses himself, and then they allegedly lose track of Ryan's boat. Have no fear, sex pest squirrel is here, riding upon some geese with a shot that clearly shows that they should have been able to see the giant ship from where their boat is. They'll also go on to point that the boat went in that direction, which is incorrect compared to the shot they had before. And then one more sexual advance towards the giraffe later, we get one more title drop.
Sammy, we going to the wild now.
And we cut to an Indiana Jones map traveling sequence, followed by one shot of them in a dangerous storm. I don't know if it was meant to make you worried about the characters, because they spent absolutely no time on it, and it's already over. We do, however, get one shot of little Ryan looking scared of the storm from his boat. Not to worry though, we quickly cut back to a blue sky, and everyone's fine. Remember the dynamic directions of maybe the Madagascar boxes sequence where they're all in different frames and there's some comedic elements of the giant giraffe put upside down and all the rest of it? You ain't gonna get any of that here. And it's funny to talk about the directing because there's actually a pretty great director involved in this movie, as this is the directorial debut of the guy behind the groundbreaking animation of Jurassic Park, Steve Spaz Williams. And before I go further, that is a name that may come across as offensive in the UK, so I'm not gonna go down the rabbit hole here, but just so British viewers are aware, it is absolutely not the same thing in the US. Nonetheless, I'm from now on just gonna call him Steve. Steve is a legend in the visual effects industry. The dinosaur animation of Jurassic Park completely changing the game for CGI animation, and the movie industry was just never the same again after the incredible work that he did. And yet, that bold and completely accurate statement of his impact on Hollywood becomes all the more baffling when you look at the quality of the animation in this movie. There are some incredibly dodgy shots in this movie, and certainly none of that flourish from Madagascar. Anyway, the koala has a brief sequence of cabin fever, which, hey, Eddie Izzard at least attempted to make funny.
Stop laughing at us, you solar twit!
Then, finally, the moment we've all been waiting for.
Swim!
Nigel?
Welcome to Madagascar.
Hello there, thank you for making it halfway through this video. Do come along and subscribe if you haven't already, or come check out our Patreon if you want to see some extra behind the scenes of anything we do on this channel. Quick little mid-plug this time around, I'll let you get back to the rest of the video.
Welcome to Madagascar.
Especially considering you can only see the lion and the giraffe in this shot, it's hard to say which movie we're looking at here. Oh wait, don't worry, it's the second Jurassic World movie, that's what we're looking at.
Whoa, those animals are being rescued.
To be fair, in this instance, you could say that Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom ripped off the wild, which is a badge of honor no one wants. Anyway, yeah, turns out these containers are loading up animals from this island and taking them all to Central Park Zoo? Is that the implication here? Couldn't we just move these animals to a wildlife reserve nearby instead of using this natural disaster as a battery farm for American zoos? Does seem like a lot of plot armor to make it not seem so bad that the humans are taking the animals. And this doesn't come back. They're just bye-bye. But yes, that's the extra twist. There's now a volcano involved, which seemed like a completely rogue escalation for this movie. And inevitably, when his container gets dropped on the island, Ryan gets scared by an elephant and runs away into the jungle. And I think that's another issue throughout this massive fever dream. With Finding Nemo, you felt the threat because there was an active force that grabbed him and took him away from Marlin. When Marlin finally reaches him in Sydney, there's some active tension as Darla has Nemo in the bag and the human characters are an actual obstacle. Here, Ryan just kind of strolled into the lorry and accidentally got taken away. It still creates a dilemma, sure, but there's less of a punch to his separation from Samson. You can kind of just imagine that if he was spotted, he'd be put right back in a container and returned for just, you know, existing. And when Ryan arrives on the island, Samson's already there and just kind of watches him run into the jungle. Again, it's a dilemma, sure, but you don't really feel any force separating them other than writing themselves into corners. There's no active antagonism. It's just kind of happening without that extra level of stakes. And it's all because this movie refuses to deal with animating human characters. They're a completely passive part of the story, and yet the movie still needs human activity to move its story forwards. On top of that, throughout Finding Nemo, we see how the obstacles he faces fundamentally evolves him as a character and a father. Here, Samson just has one big secret, and his arc is just telling his son his secret. Whilst we do see the resolution to that eventually, there is absolutely no growth to these two characters until they meet each other again. With Nemo and Marlin, they'd also grow in the time they were apart. But as you may have guessed, they then start chasing him through the jungle towards the volcano and... oh boy, yeah, there's this bit.
Ryan!
This Australian guy, which, despite setting up that this place is somewhere off of South Africa, like a certain other island I know, does make this place immediately feel like it's somewhere down under instead. Not to mention that casting choice when you also have decided to have a British koala in the main ensemble. We have a couple minutes of toilet humor, then we have a weird moment where the whole squad, all but one are herbivores themselves, starts to cheer on Samson to eat the little Australian guy. I guess it's to continue to set up the idea that he's not actually from the wild subplot, sure, but it's just such a strange beat where they're all cheering him on to kill this guy when none of these animals are canonically killers. And it gets even worse. Samson refuses to eat him, which he gets offended by and proceeds to get excited by the idea of being eaten. Yeah.
I am a delicacy.
My flesh has fruity wood notes!
So we now have a squirrel who likes to be sat on, and whatever species this is meant to be, getting off on the idea of being eaten. I feel like I'm learning too much about these writers. Who'd have thought 2006 Disney was into vor? Anyway, he runs away whilst making little fart noises upon exit because, sure, that tracks with the rest of the movie's humor.
Don't bother, I'm leaving!
Weird. And then we finally get Samson's confession.
You're
Not from.
The wild.
I'm not from the
Wild.
Wow, that was correct. I can't believe it. I guess it counts as a thematic choice if you shove the title down the viewers' throats every 10 minutes.
The wild.
And so he walks away from the others to feel sorry for himself, as the others legitimately give us a string of dialogue that genuinely includes,
How could he lie to us?
We're his best friend.
I don't think it's safe to say you could work out the rest of the scene from there. They head back for the boat, despite the fact that Ryan has nothing to do with his dad lying, but hey, I guess screw him anyway. And then once again, after trying to make him and Bridget a thing, the squirrel manages to turn the gang around. Time for Samson to talk out loud, because there's no way to show he's worried with purely visual storytelling. He's always gotta be talking.
I mean, how big can this place be anyway?
Back to Ryan, we have a hippo attempt to full-on ass slam a child. Shame the squirrel wasn't around for a piece of that. Bridget the giraffe is giving the squirrel the silent treatment, which you can only spot because she's literally saying that to him out loud. And this is the point that they start to set up that she's starting to like him back, which I think we can all agree is a great example for respecting boundaries to kids everywhere. It doesn't matter, barely any of them saw this movie. I didn't even know this existed at the time. I was 10. And then, finally now, over an hour into this movie, the villains are introduced. And the villains are a tribe of wildebeest in the jungle. Now, I'm not a zoologist by any means, but I had a quick Google on this to confirm, and wildebeests are predominantly found on grassy plains or an open woodland. I'm not sure this dense jungle comes across as open woodland. Anyway, this is the movie that had the lion driver boat, so I guess we can overlook it. Even so, this is just way too late to be introducing a villain. We introduced a million characters that didn't matter, and maybe some of the characters that do matter now. We're already halfway through the damn movie. Anyway, the gang, as I seem to now be calling them, get abducted by the wildebeest tribe, and the third act begins to roll into place.
Hey, back off.
Turns out that the wildebeest tribe have based themselves in the volcano and they have an annoying song. It's not Julian's I Like to Move It, which is actually iconic. Instead, they have a song that is just a tad irritating.
I'm having a...
And then upon researching this movie, I then came on to find that was indeed written by Monty Python legend Eric Idle. Sorry, Eric, it wasn't your best work. But don't take it personally, because no one had their finest hour making this movie. After minutes of wildebeest chanting, and I quote, really nice day, we meet the head honcho, who, to be fair, has an introduction that did make me chuckle.
Khazar, leader, prophet, choreographer.
Then the motives kick in. These wildebeest want to become carnivores. We also get to learn that they see Nigel the koala as some kind of god. Because again, every trope in the book has been thrown into this movie. Disney were clearly desperate when they made this. Depressed, we then see Samson drop shrooms.
Use your instincts. Okay.
Anyway, you may be wondering why Nigel and the Wilderboys are finding him to be a god. Well, it's because apparently a cuddly toy merchandise from the zoo landed onto the head honcho's head back in the day when he was about to be killed, and thus he must be a prophet of some kind. And honestly, I really liked this head wildebeest character. It's like someone much funnier wrote all of his bits, as he has some actually genuine great lines.
We found a lion cub.
You did?
He's also voiced by William Shatner, and in case you didn't know, he had another voice acting gig that year as the voice of the possum in Over the Hedge.
Must move toward the light.
Anyway, our boy gets real excited when he learns that lions are on the table and sends some vultures after him because the vultures have just become subservient to the wildebeest for some reason along the way. The real carnivores in this whole dynamic. Nigel also suddenly forgets all the friendship that's ever been established across the movie in a very baseline kids movie way with a curling championship and whatnot, but it's been established nonetheless, and he becomes mad with power. The koala's a dictator now. Good for him. Honestly, I'm zoned out at this point. Now to be referred to as the Great Him, as they keep calling him. Which is surprisingly ironic considering the Great Him is casted into now Eddie Susan Izzard. Fair play, Eddie. I'm sorry you were a part of this movie. Anyway, we then switch back to another Ryan does the same stock cat sound effect again, and some characters laugh at him because we really needed to revisit that beat again. The big emotional beat central to this story is that this guy can't roar properly, but it's also kind of played for laugh. It's very confusing. It's also not very funny. Apparently when you repeat the same gag an hour later when it wasn't funny in the first place, it's quite hard to laugh at again, or for the first time. Combining a gag with a reoccurring character flaw can work, but absolutely doesn't here. Anyway, finally, we get the very overly complicated reunion of Samson and Ryan. For 10 seconds, before we get another return to the well of the Mufasa Simba pastiche.
What's going on?
Just get up into that tree.
However, instead of Samson's brother murdering off from a cliff face, we get a flashback to the circus. Wait a minute, Madagascar 3 had a circus too. I guess it turns out that DreamWorks is the one ripping off Disney since this is 2006. Madagascar 3 doesn't exist yet. Anyway, the flashback shows us that Ryan wasn't the only lion with a terrible cat sound effect for a voice. Samson was once the same. Ah yes, that is the central plot line for the whole movie. Wow, isn't it beautiful? I mean, you've got to say they tried to elevate the domesticated zoo lion goes to the wild story a bit beyond Madagascar with the family-son dynamic. However, the result is a storyline that we've already seen in many other shapes and sizes. How many times have we seen this reveal that the main character isn't all he's cracked up to be trope? I mean, for a start, we've already had this scene once before in this movie already. Though at the very least, this is the more impactful of the two. And I guess for the kids watching, I guess you could say that it delivers the message in a clear and simple way. But God, is it basic. And so with that, even Samson's father goes on to say,
I should have known.
Happily getting taken off into a separate cage and abandons his own child. Also, where are the mothers in this life? Where is Samson's mother and where is Ryan's? I don't know, lions only come in male. It's funny as well, his dad also says specifically the line,
If you'd been born in the wild, you'd know how to roar.
Not his fault, my guy. You are literally responsible for his birth. It's not the child's fault that he's been put into a human circus. And actually, going back to the whole mother thing, where are the female characters in general in this movie? The only two I can remember from this movie are the giraffe and the offensive pigeon Hamir's wife. Crazy in this Disney movie, all we've had is a wife and a character who's consistently been hit on by a squirrel since the opening 10 minutes. Oof. And unfortunately, the only other woman in the cast list has been put into the role of the Great Him. Anyway, the wildebeests start headbutting the tree down.
Not so fast, Tigger.
Oh, okay. I guess wildebeests have an understanding of pop culture that extends to Winnie the Pooh? Who would have thought? What does this mean for the reality of this world? I don't have the motivation to go deep diving into Disney's The Wild even further than this. And no fake out this time, Samson fulfills that Mufasa motif and gets knocked off of a cliff and survives. I get it was this time by the wildebeests, there wasn't a stampede at the bottom, but come on, guys. I swear I'm not advocating for this guy to die, but you know. Anyway, Samson survives a straight drop straight off a cliff, and Ryan gets kidnapped properly this time. Now that we've hit that beat, we go back to the squirrel being mistaken for a ball of feces. I mean, to be fair, easily done. There's some interplay with some dung beetles being characterized as Germans in Lederhosen. Obviously. And once again, they'll never come back. And apparently now, the squirrel only just notices that his friends are gone. I felt like 20 minutes ago, my man. I guess it's just my time perception being completely abused by this movie.
Bridget! Larry! Sam!
Ryan's taken to the wildebeest's lair in the volcano. Ryan reveals his hypothesis that his dad has died with all the emotions of someone whose train's been delayed. Like, he's a bit disheartened, but we're talking about a child who's supposed to think his dad has been killed. He does the, oh, my dad can't help because he's a fake instead. Like, did you not notice that that lion drove a boat across the Atlantic Ocean because you stopped out and slept in a lorry? Put some respect on his name, my god. There's then the Patrick Warburton wildebeest who gets moved faster with yet another cartoony sound effect. Don't worry, he survives the fall as well. And they even have him shout out to really emphasize that they're not committing to a character death. We come back to the squirrel, now finding the alive Samson, and then for one more thing we have on the cliche monologue bingo card, we have the whole element of the squirrel saying, it's what's inside that counts, he needs you, Blumble. Man, my bingo card's getting too full at this point. And now they give the lion more drugs.
My, instincts?
Just kidding, turns out it's actually chameleons, of course.
Our names aren't important. I'm Cloak, he's Camo.
Conveniently for this movie's plot, they have the ability to change color of everything around them as well, including going actually completely invisible. Genuinely, it's probably the most creative use of animals in this entire movie. Doesn't necessarily make sense and it's kind of a plot device, but it's the closest thing to a real praise I've got for the rest of this movie, other than the opening wildebeest sequence. And then we get the grand reveal of Nigel to the others, now fully in his Darth Vader era.
Why, you little...
Silence again!
Slapping the only female character before getting his act together and starts trying to waylay them being cooked alive. That was a very quick arc. Is that meant to be the character? Well, it's done now. To be fair, the joke where Nigel tries to slow them down by suggesting onions, only for them to immediately produce an onion, is pretty decent. Samson does a failed entry where these superpowered chameleons are able to make him invisible. And now here we are, the final failed roar, and they use a different cat sound.
Ryan, no!
Well done, movie. You used stock sound too. And so it is the big final fight. And as Samson and the big boy wildebeest do fight, we get the inevitable reintroduction, the only thing that really ties this whole movie together, of the secret play. Oh boy, I'm excited to see how they get to make that make sense. We then get a homage to the Mufasa death scene again? What is that, like the 6th time we've covered that this movie? I don't think they're all intentional, but they're certainly all there. And I think this one is definitely deliberate, particularly the callback with Simba in the climax. It's not ripping off Madagascar if you're ripping off yourself.
Why don't we use the secret play?
Okay. It is the secret play. Fair enough. Successfully shoehorned in there.
We gotta find something bigger.
I know where we can find something bigger.
Oh no. So then we get to the scene that could have been the dramatic "it's game over" moment for Samson, that then at the last minute Ryan jumps in from the shadows to save the day and is miraculously now able to do that role that he's had no ability to do the whole movie. Yeah, unfortunately, they splice in just before the shot of Ryan in full secret play position, so there's absolutely no dramatic tension there at all. It's like having the moment in Toy Story 3 where they're all about to burn, but then splicing in shots of the aliens climbing into the crane moments before. What am I saying? Am I expecting this movie to make those kind of choices? Of course not. But yeah, he does the big ol' roar, because if you can't roar in the same way everyone else can, that's not okay, and you should conform to the version of yourself that society wants. We get a wholesome father-son moment that is kind of nice. And then we get the villain army turns on villain moment, a homage to Lion King, not a ripoff. And then we get a wonder of nature, the lion's roar with actual airbending powers. They then leave my boy for dead, as in, really, the volcano explodes on him, he is definitely dead. They get on a boat, and that's it. I also thought there was going to be a whole thing about a giant stalactite falling on them. They show several shots of it, and then I don't think it ever does. Alright then. And also, that's not quite the ending, as we then get more of that incredible, really nice day song. I'm sorry, Eric, it's no always look on the bright side of life ending. Nor is it I like to move it. Bridget the giraffe decides she wants to move it with the squirrel in the end. I guess when you hassle someone enough, you get what you want. And that's exactly what the kids leaving this movie were thinking.
Cha-cha, really nice day.
Pretty
Wild.
And that was, as the trailer puts it, Walt Disney Pictures proudly presents
The Wild.
clearly and easily Disney's terrible Madagascar ripoff. And just to emphasize my commitment to this channel, I watched this on my 28th birthday. I could have done anything with this day, but no. I went, gather round, friends, it's time to watch The Wild. And it's such a shame because, again, our pal Steve here was so instrumental in changing the visual effects and animation industry and must have leapt at the opportunity of doing a Disney animation movie. He just came at a time where they were collaborating with 4 other production houses because they were completely gunning out their animation department. However, as they probably should have learned their lesson from Ants and A Bug's Life, they really should just know that copying a rival never ends well. You're Disney, for God's sake. You don't need to copy anyone. But regardless, this was clearly a very tumultuous time at Disney that finally retired that old Disney logo, and also is the first movie post-Michael Eisner was Meet the Robinsons. So surely it only goes up from here, right? Yeah, right. I also read through some reviews at the time, and critics were equally perplexed about this, all of them essentially saying this is just an inferior version of Madagascar. And what was particularly humiliating for Disney as well is that when The Wild opened at the US box office, Ice Age 2 beat it in its 3rd week of release, so it never came out anywhere close to number 1 and was instantly squashed by everything around it. With The Wild opening in 4th place behind Ice Age, Benchwarmers, and the all-time classic Scary Movie 4. Oof. Man, what went so wrong? For now, I'll finally end things off there. My name's been Daz, thank you very much for reaching the end of this video, and I shall see you in a little bit.